Hey guys, Keith here. Wanted to spend a bit of time running through all the changes that have come out to xLights since version 35. So we're going to cover 36 through 41. As usual, just focusing on the enhancements. Before I get into covering those though, if you haven't already done so, think about clicking down there on the subscribe button and you'll get notifications of when these videos and the other videos that I make come out. So let's start with the first one, which is around a law data export. If I go and create a sequence, which I've done here, which is 25 milliseconds, because law only supports sequences which are multiples of 10 milliseconds, if you try to export this to an LCB file, which you've always been able to do, and you come up here and say an LCB file, you click OK, it's now going to give you a warning if you've got something like a 25 millisecond timing, because that's not divisible by 10 milliseconds. And then if you were to import it into law, it wouldn't come in properly. And so it now gives you that error and prevents you from doing it. Whereas previously it would have saved it as 25 milliseconds, and then you would have tried to load it into law and it probably would have rounded it down to 20 milliseconds and it all would have looked wrong. And then we'd have a bug report and everything else. The second change I wanted to run over is Vixen timing mark import. It's there. It's not perfect yet. I think it possibly works more with last year's Vixen files than this year's Vixen files, because I'm still working on some stuff there. But you can import the timing track. You come down here, select TIM files. You find a Vixen 3 file, you click open, it gives you a list of the timing tracks that are inside that file, and so forth. You click OK and it creates those timing tracks for you. Like I said, I'm not sure it works with the very latest. I do have some of the very latest ones. I need to do a little bit more work on it, but starting to get there so that you can bring those Vixen timing tracks in if you're maybe moving over as many others have this year. Add to check sequence, a check on the matrix face effect files. There's actually a bunch of additional checks I'm now making on the face effect. Most of them as a result of the xLights around the world sequence this year. They did some funky things with some of the images in the face effects, and they're fine, they work great in the sequence, but when you try to bring those face effects in and put them onto say singing trees or singing bulbs, etc., which aren't using the matrix, a number of them have not been coming in correctly, and now there's some additional errors that will show up in those face effects. And let me give you an example of what one of those might look like. So if I grab a face effect, he says not grabbing it. If I grab a face effect and if I do something like maybe do a bottom half here, that doesn't make much sense. Obviously, on icicles, it's not going to make much sense at any rate, but rather than going and find my faces. Doing this on a node type model doesn't make a lot of sense either. Actually, that may not work. Let me find my faces. Yeah, face left and face right. Let's go down and grab face left and face right. It doesn't actually make a lot of sense because obviously it's chopped it off, and that's unlikely to be something you're going to want to do on a face effect. And so now when you run check sequence and you go down and you look at your errors, it will warn you that the face effect has a sub buffer on it, and maybe that's not something you want to do. The other one, and this is the one that the shared sequence has, is it has I think it has a rotation. I think it has a slight rotation, and you can see down here that when you rotate a face effect, it does all sorts of funky things and the face doesn't look right. And when you take the face back, it all looks like you'd expect it to look. And so now when again you run check sequence and you go to the bottom here, it tells you that roto zoom is active on a face effect, and you may not want that. That may not render correctly. So yeah, a couple of extra warnings to find some common problems. First time I saw that, I stared at it for 20 minutes trying to work out why the hell it wasn't working properly. So trying to save you all some time there. Let's keep going. Auto hide on the face effect. This is actually kind of cool. And once again, noticing from the shared sequence. So if you have a number of words here, you break them down. Sometimes what people like to do is have their faces only appear when the faces are actually singing, and so what they'll do is they'll put their timing track down, and then they'll drop multiple face effects over the duration of the sequence, each time the person's singing. So the face comes back, it sings a little bit, it disappears again, it comes back and it sings a little bit, and you end up with lots and lots of face effects. And if you look at the xLights Around the World sequence this year, it has exactly that problem. Well, I say problem, it's not a problem, but they do that. So instead, what I've got here is I've added some additional properties to the face effect. Let's not make it quite so long. It seems a little excessive. So now there is this suppress when not singing. Okay, and the idea being is, it's currently not set for timing track, which is why it's on all the time. So it starts off hidden, it comes on, it sings, it goes away, and then sings again, and it goes away again. So now you can just drop the face effect over the entire sequence, and the face will come and go as necessary to sing your particular, the lyrics. So it saves you having to drop hundreds of face effects and lets you just drop one, a few seconds saved on sequencing. More bulk edits to the face effect. So now when you've got multiple face effects, you can now come up and bulk edit the timing track, and you can also bulk edit the face definition, but you can only do that if all the face effects are on the same face. If you have two face effects here on different faces, then I'm right clicking and you can't bulk edit the face definition because it's obviously on a different model and the face definitions can be different, but you can still bulk edit the timing track. That helps particularly when you do an import, because when you import the sequence with a bunch of face effects, they're all pointing at whatever the name of the face was that was on the model that it was imported from, and you're going to want to have to go through and update them all to point to the names of the face definition that you've got on your particular model. So hopefully that saves you a little bit more time on import. We talked about the roto zoom and subbuffer checks. Manual speed control on video. So, in the interest, and once again, you can tell I spent a little bit of time playing with Ryan's xLights Around the World sequence. He used a bunch of video in that sequence for sequencing, and it's a great way of getting a bunch of effects that you just couldn't generate in xLights, or even if you could generate them in xLights, there'd be hundreds of layers and lots of effort, etc. And sometimes grabbing a video like something from Motion Loops or something and whacking it onto your whole house, etc., can really give you a great effect. So let's do that. Let's grab a video. I have a couple here. Where are we? Video. All right, let's pick something. It's pretty easy to see what it's doing. All right, so we've always had ways of playing video. There's a couple of things that have changed here. If you just saw that then, but when it got to the end, the video went blue. That's what it's always done. And if I throw a layer below and stick a fire effect on it, obviously the fire effect's going to be invisible because the video is rendering over the top of it. And of course, when the video ends, which it does here in about 15 seconds, you get this blue screen. Well, I've now added an additional render style, which is normal with no blue. And so when it gets to the end of the video, instead of showing a blue screen, it's actually going to allow the underlying layer to come through. So you don't have to play with the duration as accurately if you want to play the video normally. You can just extend the video a little bit beyond it and not worry about it. So that's part of it. But I also added a manual and loop. And basically with manual, you get to control the speed of the video manually. So you can make it extremely fast. You can make it a lot slower. And in fact, and this takes a little bit of time to render, so once you go negative, it will actually play the video in reverse. Now, it renders extremely slowly. So if you're going to go this way, you'd better have render caching turned on, because otherwise you're going to spend most of the rest of your life waiting for it to render. It is really quite slow. And the reason for that is because as it jumps back through the video, it's got to go and find the keyframe in the video and move forward. So it actually ends up processing each frame of the video a lot, and it takes a long time to do. So let's get out of that, because that's going to take forever. The other thing you have here is you actually have a value curve. And so you can actually change the speed of the video during the effect. So you can start it at 0 here, or very close to 0, end it at close to 0, and speed it up and slow it down. And so now the video will start slow, it accelerates, and then it slows back down again. Looks like it ran out of time. All right, so now you can play with the video speed manually and control how that video plays, accelerate it, slow it down. Smart entry, these are kind of cool. This was actually Billy's idea, and it's a really good one. So if you've got a model, I don't know, this will do. Actually, let me try and find something where I don't have a controller connection. I don't have a controller connection on my bow here. So normally what you'd have to do here is you'd either manually type in WS2811:X, or you'd click on the ellipsis here and you'd go to the dialogue and you'd edit. But the vast majority of you use WS2811 pixels. So now you can just type in the number 5, press enter or tab, and it will fill in the 2811. It just assumes that that's what it is. So hopefully that makes it a little bit quicker for you to enter controller connections. The other thing that you can do is you can come up here to the start channel and you can say #3, meaning this is on universe 3, and you press tab or enter and it will assume that it's the first channel on that universe. So if you follow what I generally think is a good way of doing start channels, you know, when you start the first prop on an output from the controller, you put it on channel 1 on the universe, it becomes as simple as typing #202 and the :1 is inserted automatically by xLights when you move off the field. So hopefully that will save people a little bit of time entering things in. This one here is a little bit hard to demonstrate, but in the start channel dialogue, if you're chaining models together, you've always had the ability here to go in here and chain it to the end of a particular model. Some folks have a number of previews with different models, and some people don't actually do a layout of their house, but they would have their models on different previews, or their trees on one, their snowflakes on another, and so forth. And when you come to chaining the models together, sometimes you don't want to see this really, really long list of models. You just want to see the ones that are currently in the preview that you're looking at. And so let me give you an example of that. Let's go to unassigned. I've got a couple of models here in unassigned. And so if I click on one of these and go to my start channel and click on this, so by default, I can put it at the end of, by default, it selects from this preview only. So this list is actually quite short because it's only showing the models that are on this particular preview. Now, of course, I can uncheck this and it will show me all the models again. But it's a way to try and filter the list down and make it faster for you to find the models when you're chaining them together. So that's what that one's all about. All right, let's move up. Add export to a really large image file, the wiring diagram. What that means here is, so for some time now, of course, you've all been able to come over here, click on your model and bring up the wiring view. Sometimes on your wiring view, the wiring is going to be extremely dense and it becomes quite hard to discern the numbers. And not so much here, this is barely 100 pixels, but you know, some people might have 2 and even 300 pixels in a custom model, and it gets very, very busy. Now, you've always been able to export this image, and it will basically export an image as large as this, but there's now this export large image, and what that will do is it will export a significantly higher resolution image, which you can then, you know, print using a photo printer or something, and hopefully it means that you can refer to it a lot more easily than potentially you were able to with just the default image saving. Bulk controller upload. So if you're running a stack of controllers and they're all the same type, you've now got this upload to all controllers. Now, when I say all, it's not technically all. You do get to come through and say, actually, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and I think that's it. They're actually my Falcon controllers. So I can select all of these. I can come up to here and say, yeah, that's my Falcon controllers, and I can click upload. If I do that, what it will do is it will progressively go through each one of those controllers, re-upload the input definition and re-upload the output definition for that controller. So if you've got a large show and you just want to smash the data out to all the controllers and you've set everything up properly and you know the upload's going to work, it's just a quick way to update a large show without having to click on hundreds and hundreds of models, right click, choose this, choose that, etc. Trying to automate a few things for you. So that's what that one's about. Allow subbuffers to be moved. This one's kind of cool as well. So you'd all by now hopefully be familiar with your subbuffers, and you've got your subbuffer here. And if you, I don't know, let's make this the left third, etc. You've always been able to come up here and resize it. Well, with this release, you can now come and click in the middle here and just drag the subbuffer around, and you don't have to go and play with all the corners and try to get them exactly right. So hopefully it's a lot easier. Also, if you hold the control key down and then click and drag, no matter how far up and down your mouse goes, it will only drag it from left to right. And if you hold control shift and then click and drag, no matter how much you move the mouse left or right, the model or the buffer will only move up and down. So you can constrain which axis it moves on when you do the click and drag. So hopefully that makes editing the sub buffers and moving them around, or even potentially creating overlaps, a lot easier to do. Saves you a bunch of clicking. Applying subbuffers to multiple effects. So the subbuffers has been one of those things that for the longest time we've not been able to bulk edit, partly because I struggled with a way to do it. But now what you can do is you can click on an effect like that, then just grab all of these effects. Whoops. Let's hold the control key down and, oh, sorry, didn't mean that. Let's hold the shift key down and re-grab that effect. And what you can come up here is you can say, right click up here and say, apply this to all selected effects. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that particular sub buffer and it's going to apply it to all the effects here that I've got selected. So it's like a bulk edit. It's a little bit different, but there's your spirals just there. And there's our shockwave, which is just in that small region. So you now have effectively bulk edit on your subbuffers. So hopefully, again, something will save you a little bit more time in your sequencing. Music value curves. This is a Rob V's idea, and it's quite a good idea. So this will let you, let's use our video here as a classic example of this. So I can come up here and choose the hue here, and the hue, as you would know, let's shorten our video up so we're not running off the end. As you move the hue around, the color of the video changes. So I can move it from green, from blue, and so forth, and shift it all around. So now what you can do is you can come up here and you can do it with a value curve and change the color of the video. But there's now a couple of extra default value curves, and one of them is music. It's not going to work here. Sorry, I need to actually have some music. So let's discard that. Create a musical sequence. Audio. I don't know. I'm going to use one of these talking tree things, not because just because YouTube's become very finicky about audio, and I don't want the video to be pulled down. So let's just do that. Let's go back to our matrix. There it is. Let's grab our video effect and we'll whack it on the matrix. All right, so let's go up to our hue. Let's choose our music timing track. We click OK. And what you'll see is the video is actually, make it loop. The video is actually changing color according to the intensity of the music, because what it does is behind the scenes, and you can't actually see it, it just shows up here as a note. So you can't actually see anything up here in the value curve, but the music value curve is basically varying the hue parameter according to the intensity of the music. And that's how it's working, which is kind of cool. Now you can constrain the dimensions on which it moves. So there's a couple of parameters here. So you can say, well, actually, I just want the hue to be between the top value and let's say about 75%. And when you look at this, if you look very closely, there's a red line and a green line to show you where those limits are set. And so now you don't get as much color variation due to music, but it still varies. So that's kind of cool. And you can apply it to lots of things. Look, I'm sure some people will come up with some great ideas. I kind of like it on the wave effect because you can do things like change the height of the wave and do that according to music. And so now you get a waveform that actually looks like it's responding. And you can imagine if you applied a couple of these, you could even have something that actually looked like it was the waveform of the sound. I mean, it wouldn't be, but it'd look like it. Applying thickness to that as well looks really cool. Yeah, so the other one I added was, I also added another one, which is, sorry, where are we? Yeah. Actually, let's cancel that. Let's go back. Oops, sorry, I should have clicked OK. So let's do the thickness as well. So I added another one here, which is a music trigger fade. It has a few more parameters. So basically, again, you get to constrain just, where the thickness is, or so, what the least thickness is and what the maximum thickness would be as a result of this. You get to define a trigger level. So a trigger level is, basically it's set at 50%. So when the audio track here reaches 50% of the available, volume range here, it will cause it to trigger. When it triggers, what will happen is the waveform will jump from this low value to this high value, and then over 10 frames, it will slowly fade back down to 0 again. Or if it hits another part of the song here where it's back up at more than 50%, it will re-trigger again, and so it will stay up. So let's see what that looks like. So you can see as it's expanding, it gets thicker, and then it fades back down to 0 again. So it triggers and fades. Now these are similar sorts of things to what you see in the VU meter effect. So if you've used, the level, trying to remember which one it is now. The level pulse. So if you use something like the level jump, actually, level pulse, it's one of these. It does a similar sort of thing where it pulses and then fades away. In that case, it colors in the whole thing, but now you can use a similar thing and apply it to almost pretty much any parameter that supports a value curve. So hopefully some people will do some interesting things with that, and potentially it'll make your sequencing a lot easier because you've got to spend less time mucking around. Bulk edit to files and path names. Okay, so this is kind of useful if, particularly if you've imported a sequence and you didn't do it right and you forgot to set the paths correctly. You can come in here, go to my images, let's throw Santa up there, and let's drag another image down, and let's we'll leave Santa on there as well. And so let's say I've got two Santas here, one there and one there, and I can now come up and select those two effects, come over here, right click, bulk edit the file name. I can choose it to be the Facebook logo. And so now both effects are the Facebook logo. I don't think that's hugely useful in and of itself, but what I can also do is I can select them again, right click here and bulk edit the path. And so I can come here and change the paths. And so now it's looking for that f.png file in the home folder on both the effects. Now, it won't change the name of the image file. So if I give that a different name there, and I come here and bulk select them again, and we'll move this back to the images directory. What you'll see is that it didn't change the file name. That one's still F, and this one here should be GW. It is, but it's looking in that, but it's updated the folder. So a great way to quickly change all of your image locations, just select all your effects, do a bulk edit, change the path, and hopefully all your image files will be fixed, and you won't have to be opening up the XML file, which is a risky activity. Removing empty groups. So I don't know about you, but from year to year, I do add and delete models, and every now and then I end up with a group or two up here that no longer have any models inside them. Not sure I do anymore because I've deleted them. But so if I come up here and add a group, let's add another group. Okay, so I've got these two groups here. There's not actually any models in there. Well, you can now come up here, just right click and say delete empty groups, and it will purge those empty groups and get rid of all of those. It's also great, I found, if I wanted to clear someone's display off, I can select all the models, delete all the models, but you get left with all the groups. But now you can just right click and say purge all the empty groups, and they'll all be gone. So a quick way to do that. Changing the row header text color. Okay, so there's been a few issues recently, particularly on OS X, where dark mode's been introduced, and a number of people have had problems, particularly with this area of xLights, where this area is all in black, and they click on the model, they can see it, but when they click off, they can't. And this area here, where the time and everything displays, is not displaying correctly. Now, we've always had up here, well, for some time now, we've had the color manager where you've been able to come in and change the row header color. I've added also the ability for you to change the text color here. So if you want that to be green because it's hideous, you can do that. And also this area up here follows the color down here. So if you change the row header color to be, I don't know, nice dark brown, reddy brown, you can change those colors. Click OK. I thought that followed it, but maybe not. Actually, Dan might have changed something else there. I'm not sure. Anyway, but most importantly, you can now change the color here, and hopefully that'll help it look a little bit better. What else have we got? So we've talked about these two, but we haven't talked about this. So this is Scott's contribution. Scott, for some time now, has been playing with the SubModel Dialogue with this draw model. dialogue where you can draw things out, etc. Well, he's now added things like the ability to zoom in on the grid and zoom out on the grid. He's also added you the ability to come in here and underlay an image, much like you can with the custom model dialogue. You can hide it as well. So yeah, zoom. He's also sorry, let's go to freehand. Where's freehand from model? Freehand, there it is. So you can come up here and you can draw. Well, now you can come up here, select that stuff, and you can copy and you can paste now. So you can actually draw a section and then copy and paste it and cut it, etc. Just using Control-C or right-clicking and accessing the cut, copy and paste menus here as well. So yeah, this continues to get better and better. I still think there are some things that we could do with this to make creating submodels where the order of the pixels in a snowflake, for instance, matter, and you want to put them in the right order so that when you do a morph or something on it, they come out correct. Today, when you do those sort of models, you've still got to enter all of those nodes in manually. So, for instance, if I show you this one here, which has all been done, you'll see that every node's had to be typed out in exactly the right order in order to produce exactly the right effects that I want to produce with them. We don't quite yet have a way to easily point and click and select those nodes. You've got to type all those numbers in and work them out. So there's still some work to do there, but it's made a lot of progress. All right, so that's the xLights changes. There's one XCapture change that I'll quickly show you. Of course, we don't include a shortcut to XCapture. It's buried down here in the xLights directory. As a minor change. So you've always had this ability down here to choose the frame timing or allow XCapture to detect it. There's now also a manual setting in here, so you can come in here and manually set the timing to any particular number of milliseconds. So if you've got a file or a capture that was generated at a particularly odd frame rate, you can now actually just manually enter it, and hopefully that will save you a bunch of time. So that's a minor change to XFade, sorry, XCapture. All right, let's quickly do the scheduler, because there's a few changes in the scheduler as well. And of course, I've got no playlist because I wiped my show folder. So a couple of things. There's now a new API called Set Playlist as Background. That's kind of useful. Couple of ways that you can use it. You can create a button now. Actually, let's add a playlist. Playlist 1. Add. Get very lazy. Playlist 2. All right. So you've always been able to come up here and set the background playlist to set it to 1 or 2 or none. Now, because there's an API there, you can now come in and you can add a button here, which is set playlist, I don't know, let's say playlist 2 as background. All right. And it'll be down the bottom. Set playlist as background. You have to define the playlist number. You set it to PL2. You click OK, and you're done. There's also one for clearing it. So you can say clear background and clear background playlist. It doesn't have any parameters. You click OK, click OK. And so now you've got this set playlist 2 as background. So if you click on that and then come up and look at your background playlist, what do you know? Playlist 2 is selected. If you click this button, it's going to clear it. So we're going to come into background playlists and nothing's going to be selected. So, and of course, because you can set them as buttons, you can also trigger those from events. You can trigger those from web calls and all those sorts of things. So If you want to be able to switch in and out background playlists in your show, you can now do that. You can even sequence, or sorry, schedule changes to the background playlist if that's what you want to do. In my advanced workshop, I'll go through some of those things as well. Fade in and a fade out playlist item. So for some time now, of course, if I add an FSCQ in, of course, I'm in the wrong show folder. This explains why everything looks strange. Let's change my show folder. I should have known that. Look at that. See, no networks file. Not that it matters. I wasn't going to put any data out. Documents. Home. All right. No. All right. So what are we talking about? Oh, fade. That's right. So if you've got a sequence, this is my playlist, and it's an advanced playlist. If I wanted, for instance, this entire playlist to fade out at the end, but I didn't want to go into xLights and do all the work in there, there is now a fade playlist item. You would obviously need to set its priority really high because you want it to be right at the top. You can set it to fade out. You can set up here how long you want it to fade out for. So you might say 5 seconds. You can also say here that you actually want it to run for the remainder of the step time. And then if you know how long the step is, which in this case is 72.6 seconds, I can work out that I actually want to start this, I don't know, 67 seconds in. So 67 seconds in, or about 5 seconds from the end, this is going to kick in and it's going to start fading out. Now I can limit the channels that are going to fade out, or I can do all of them. And it will just lower the brightness of the show gradually over those 5 seconds. There's also a fade in. You'd probably do that at the beginning, and you can fade your show up as well. But don't forget, you do need to set that priority high because you obviously want it to get applied last and fade down your show. If you put it as a low priority and your sequence was a higher priority, your sequence would obviously just overwrite it all and nothing would actually happen. So yeah. So I got a way to fade in and out playlists. Make it easier for virtual matrices. So this is interesting. If you're running something like a color-like card or something like that, a lot of them will allow you to map an area of the screen onto your element. And using a virtual matrix can be an extremely powerful way to render the data onto the screen and then let that card pick the data up and push the data out to your device. Historically, we've always given you the ability to position where your virtual matrix was going to be displayed, but it kind of gets hard if your matrix is actually still quite small. My matrix might be only, I don't know, 128 pixels by, I don't know, by 64. And obviously, even at the smallest size here, this is still 366. So what you can do is you can come in here and you can say, set the size based on the matrix size, and then you can specify a multiplier as well if you want. So if I set my matrix as only 16 by 32, and click OK, when I play this, I'm going to mute it first. Again, I don't want YouTube to be grumpy at me. You can see it's created a tiny little virtual matrix up here where it's displaying the effects. But if that was the part of the screen that you were then mapping out to your video card, etc., that's exactly what you would want. So that's why that's there. That's what that one's all about. Okay, so for a while now, people have been wanting to be able to, a lot of people like to run like a background playlist, an all-day playlist, which might be Christmas music all day. They've got an FM transmitter and they feel like they want to be a radio station all day. So they run Christmas music all day. And then when their show starts, they want their show to kick off, but they don't want to interrupt that previous schedule just interrupt the middle of a song and start playing their show. They want to wait for whatever song is playing to finish, and then they want their show to start. So now included in the schedule options is this gracefully interrupt any lower priority playing schedule. So if there's another schedule that's already playing that's a lower priority that this one's going to interrupt, instead of just smashing over the top of it, it will wait for the current step to finish, and then it will kick off this particular schedule. So the other thing that's available up here in the web interface is a new buttons plugin. So I've called it Not So Big Buttons. And what it does is it provides you with more buttons across the screen. And if you downscale it to maybe a largish phone, it's going to give you a much greater density of buttons, and they actually turn out to be about thumb size. So it's quite a nice way to get more buttons more easily on your phone. So that's that one. EDM. So we've had an EDM playlist item for a long time now, but it didn't work. So now it does. Well, it kind of does. So there's this add RDS item. This is actually just for an EDM RDS. You'll need to choose the COM port that you've got your transmitter connected on. You can type in a station name. A station name is up to 8 characters. So you can call it Xmas or something. And then you can put a bunch of text in, and you can draw upon the name of the step, etc. So you can put percent, step name, percent, and it will output that as radio text to the EDM RDS transmitter. It won't change dynamic PS. Dynamic PS is something I need to go back and spend some more time on. I had an enormous amount of trouble getting this working, but it does work now as long as you're happy with radio text. So that's that one. Talked about that one. Oh, adding a playlist. So the ability to count down a number of seconds, that's done in a text playlist item. So we've had here for some time the countdown, but there's now a countdown second. So if you want to do a countdown from 10, you just put 10 in there. Here you'd put percent text percent, and it will basically count down from 10 seconds. Actually, I don't even think you need to put that. Maybe you do. I can't remember now. But yeah, you put in 10 and it counts down to 10 on your display, overwriting or integrating with whatever you had before. We talked about not so big buttons. Yes, that's not it. And at randomness. So I've also made a change when you have the playlist playing and you click on this random. It always played the songs randomly, but it was truly random, meaning I had no way of knowing what it was going to choose next, and it was entirely possible. It wouldn't let the same song play twice in a row, but other than that, there was nothing that was really forcing it to ensure that the randomness covered the entire set of songs. It could get, random is random, right? So clumping is a natural thing to happen. And so you could still get clumping of songs and you could hear the same song, I don't know, 3 times in 6 or something, and that's entirely possible. So I've changed the random number generator here, and now what it will do is it will still choose the songs randomly, but it will make sure that every song plays once before it repeats. It didn't work the first time. If you noticed, it played THX twice, but that was because it started THX before I put it in random mode. But yeah, it'll make sure every song plays before it will go back and allow any song to play again. And it will still make sure that even when it resets, it doesn't play the same song twice in a row, but it might play them a song apart. That's possible, unlikely, but it could happen depending on the size of your playlist. That's it, I think. That's the last of the changes up to 41. So not a huge number of enhancements. There are a bunch of bug fixes behind it. There's even some pretty nasty bugs that have been fixed in the last few releases that were causing some pretty random crashes. There's still, I think, as at 41, I've got one bug that occurs quite frequently still that we've never managed to get to the bottom of, but anything else that has occurred more than 4 times this week has been fixed. So it's looking pretty good. So thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you all have a great season. Christmas is almost upon us. I need to start my setup tomorrow. I've got 1 month to get my show set up before my wife starts getting upset with me. So I better leave this alone and get on with my show. Thanks, guys.